some or most Arab states, Sunni, moderate, pro-Western, at least when it comes to the official regimes, do cooperate with Israel. And basically, this irritates all these erstwhile enemies of Israel, Turkey, Iran, Palestinians alike, who are trying actually to use that and use coronavirus as kind of an epidemic disease that show that normalization has, or some of them were infected by a Western sense called normalization, which is something that tears up the whole Middle East and the Arab world.
The fact that the Jews never had sovereignty, and the fact that the Jews were wandering around the world, and the idea of the wandering Jew always made them susceptible to charges of spreading the plague. From early on, from the time of Claudius, from the time of the Roman emperors, all the way, of course, to the Black Plague in 3048, 3049. Always the Jews were kind of like perceived and were defined by anti-Semites as worms, as those who are spreading plagues, as those who are making, poisoning rivers, whatever they want. All the anti-Semitic tales had something to do with this conspiratorial Jews who are basically delivering the plague. Not to say anything about the Nazis, for whom the Jews were always like worms. This was like the term which were used. There were those who had to be extinguished, had to be destroyed because they're spreading something.
Another book that is very problematic is the reprints of the Mein Kampf of Kifahi for Adolf Hitler. It is amazing how many reprints are there in modern times, and so you will tend to find, and these are different reprints for the book. So here, these are, if you in combating anti-Semitism, you have to work with the culture. That you are fighting against all these odds, against all this literature that's being spread within the Arab world.
Al-Banna, in one of his statements, confirmed that, as he said, in one of it, as long as one Jew is fighting in Palestine, the mission of the Muslim Brotherhood will not end. As soon as the cooperation between al-Husseini and the Brotherhood began, the Brotherhood began to wage horrific campaigns against the Jews to clarify their dangers to the Muslims and the Islamic nation or Islamic Ummah. This confirms that the Mufti's success in recruiting the Muslim Brotherhood for Hitler and the Nazis. On the other hand, Mufti helped al-Banna to reach the prestigious social and political circles after he was a leader of the marginalized and lower classes.
One which you have never heard about and probably never will after this lecture hear about again is the Israeli refugee problem. In the course of the war, 70,000 Israelis, Jews, and then later they became Israelis after the state was declared, 70,000 Jews were displaced from their homes, from homes in kibbutzim, settlements, areas, urban areas, which were overrun by the Arab states' armies, or threatened with being overrun by Arab states' armies. 70,000 Jews became refugees. Now, you may think 70,000 is a very small number, but in Palestine at the time, there were 650,000 Jews. So in the course of the war. So 70,000 would have been 10% of Palestine's Jewish population were turned into refugees in the course of the war. Say in America, if a tenth of the population was displaced and turned into refugees, you'd have 30 million refugees, 30 million in America. So 70,000 for Israel was an enormous refugee problem. But it didn't last because Israel won the war. Most of the territory conquered by the Arab states in the initial stages of the war was reconquered by the Jews, and the people who'd been moved out of their settlements and urban neighborhoods essentially went back to where they'd come from. So no Israeli refugee problem resulted from the 1948 war. By the end of the war, there was no refugee problem among Israelis.
It's impossible. The Western culture is part and parcel of Iranian identity in the last 200 years. If you take these issues of constitutionalism, parliamentarism, new education, science, it's all borrowed from the West. So what we see in Iran is a country with different layers of identities. What happened in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution, that there was a dramatic change in Iran from a policy of westernizing, pro-American, friendly with Israel, loyalty to the monarchy, to an Islamic republic which is raised based on Islam or Islamism or radical Islam or different aspects of Islam, because there is no one Islam either. Of course there is one Islam. There is the Islam of the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century. But we don't live today with what was Islam in the 7th century.